Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Andy Zull. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on our industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Andy at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Thursday, so subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification whenever we go live. Jeff, how you doing this week?
All right, David. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. I think my voice broke on the first sentence because I haven't really talked to adults in the last week. And I was just like, hey, time to do work. Broken.
There you go.
Yeah, no. So
smooth.
Real smooth like usual. Andy, how you doing this week?
Very good. Good to be back. We'll just work out the kinks just kind of on the air.
Just
as you do.
Right out. Yeah. No, we really appreciate you stepping in like on almost the least amount of notice possible.
I feel like it's almost better.
Yeah.
Less time to think about it.
Yeah.
Just jump in here and go for it.
Just like, hey, we're going to podcast right now. Mm-hmm. Let's do it.
Sure.
All right. Well, before we jump into our first story, we have a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by ShopView, a CAI solution. The manufacturing execution system, or MES, you choose massively impacts what your operations will look like for years to come. Doing your due diligence and cautiously weighing your options is critical in selecting the right system for your business. The Manufacturing Execution System Buyer's Guide offers important considerations when selecting MES software, mapping out the steps that lead you to the MES that checks all your boxes. So there's a link to download this buyer's guide in the body copy as well as the live chat. So download it. Let us know what you think about it. Ironing out all those kinks.
Just work through it. Just keep
by that
just
second
go.
read. It's going to be
solid, near perfect. For our first story this week, Trump announces Boeing wins contract for Secretive future fighter jet. On Friday, President Donald Trump announced that Boeing will be responsible for manufacturing the Air Force's future fighter jet. According to the AP, the new jet will have stealth and penetration capabilities that far exceed those in the current fleet. These capabilities could be critical in a potential Chinese conflict. The jet is called Next Generation Air Dominance, or NGAD, and will lead a fleet of drone aircraft designed to penetrate air defenses. Trump said the new jet will be named the F-47, nodding to the current 47th president. The initial Air Force contract is worth an estimated $20 billion. Critics ask why we need a new jet, especially when we still haven't made all the F-35s that we ordered and likely will spend $1.7 trillion on the project. And the B-21 Raider will also feature many of the same advanced materials, AI, propulsion, and stealth capabilities and cost at least $130 billion for the first 100. Jeff, is this a bailout that's not a bailout?
I think when you look at a lot of the different factors associated with this decision, you could definitely go that way. There's a lot of different things to look at here. First of all, I'm sure it makes any future pilots of this aircraft feel really good when they say the Pentagon's decision was based on a good value for the government. Mm-hmm. Because that's what military spending is all about.
The best overall value.
Finding the best deal. Mm-hmm. How can we get there in the best sort of way that doesn't cost us a lot? Mm-hmm. That's what makes people feel good.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with aircraft and unmanned aircraft and all the different technologies associated there. So that was interesting. I also thought the last paragraph of the story brought about some interesting points, too, that kind of offer maybe a little bit perspective on why Boeing was selected here. In terms of having a much longer range than the F-35, that could be something that falls into Boeing's wheelhouse. When you look at some of the larger aircraft that they do design and have been successful with, you can appreciate that. But then when they also talk about the fact that it needs to have an entirely different level of low observability, that isn't Boeing's wheelhouse. That is where you expect somebody like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman to come into play here. And a lot of people, a lot of industry observers were quote unquote shocked
Yeah.
at this decision to go with Boeing for all the issues that we've talked about with Boeing, but then also the fact that the F-22 was really the last military aircraft or fighter jet that they were responsible for, and they did that with with Northrop 20 years ago. So they really came out of the blue on this one. They were not somebody who was in the lead for probably all of the reasons that we've discussed, as well as the president's current beef with them over Air Force One. So this was shocking in a lot of ways. A bailout? Maybe. Could be.
Well, I mean, it just the other thing that jumped out to me in this, Jeff, was that when you hear something like the best overall value to the government, quote unquote, I mean, isn't Boeing putting itself at even greater risk? Because that's how it wound up so deep in the hole on Air Force One.
Well, this contract is supposed to take away a lot of those fixed price elements that did get them in trouble with other military deals. This is just seed money, if you will.
Yeah.
So this is for research and development to help them go further, faster. Cost more money if it needs to. So they were smart in that respect, which also lends you to be very I don't know, suspicious, I guess, of the deal and a lot of the surroundings. There's also the fact that this was just for the Air Force. This is not for the Navy.
Yeah.
So Lockheed and Northrop Grumman are still in the running for that version
Yeah.
of this aircraft,
Yeah.
which is also very odd, especially because those two, Lockheed and Northrop, work together quite a bit on all of these aircraft, and Boeing has always kind of been the third wheel. So a lot still to be determined here.
No, that's a whole other can of worms, the whole, like, the Navy to figure out their own version. So Dan Grazier, and you mentioned this, Jeff, but Dan Grazier, a military procurement analyst at the Stimson Center, said $20 billion is, quote, just seed money. Andy, he says that the total cost will be hundreds of billions of dollars, but many of the critics are saying, do we even need this? I mean, when you look at what it's presenting, do we even need this?
Yeah, it's interesting to look at that because defense spending, as Jeff alluded to, is this third rail where, it's almost a blank check, and it's the third largest, tied for the third largest share of the government pie chart overall. And it's just not really something that's discussed of in terms of like hammering out, getting every penny's worth. So I thought that was an interesting part of this story, was going through this angle of whether we need this elaborate new manned jet, given all the technology that's been developed and will be developed, over the course of this contract. Now, an Air Force review apparently determined that it should go forward, and it wasn't just the Pentagon saying this; it was think tanks and academics and that sort of thing. So that I think should make people feel a little more supportive of it or more comfortable with it. And I think that might be healthy, that this is even being discussed, healthy for defense spending overall, because if you're willing to ask those questions, at least they're being asked. They're not just, handing a check over to Boeing, Lockheed, whatever, and saying, build us this thing. So,
Oh, yeah. At face value, it looks like just, okay, Boeing's getting their piece of it now.
Right.
And then you're like, there was, look at due diligence. Look at that. Someone actually looked into it and said, no, really, we should go with this one.
Yeah.
And that gave me at least a little peace of mind.
yeah.
So there are going to be more F-47s produced than F-22s. There are more than 180 F-22 fighter jets currently in service. So the plan is to make quite a few of these. One thing that I kind of got a kick out of also was how they justified the number 47. Because just say why you named it the F-47. But in a statement, the Air Force just wanted to make sure everyone knew why the number 47 was chosen. It was chosen because it honors the historic P-47, which was critical during World War II. I'm sure that had a lot of weight as to why it was called the F-47. It pays tribute to the founding year of the Air Force, 47, another good reason to name it, and it does recognize the achievement of the 47 president's pivotal support for the development of the world's first sixth-generation fighter. Jeff, when I looked at those, I just thought maybe number 3 all the way and not 1 and 2.
Yeah.
It's just a fun coincidence. That's all.
Crazy. Just crazy. I'm surprised they didn't call it the F. Never mind. I understand why they didn't call it that now. All right. Well, our next most popular story this week. 8 new Corvettes were stolen from a GM plant in Kentucky. Thieves recently stole 8 Corvettes right off the lot at GM's Bowling Green assembly plant in southern Kentucky. According to the AP, the plant has been the Chevy Corvette's home since the early 80s. The 8 cars were valued at $1.2 million, and fortunately, they were quickly recovered and the officers actually made an arrest. Thieves cut into the plant's fence to get the cars out, and while being booked, one of the suspects said, "If I would have made it back to Michigan, I would have been paid big." I think that's what they call a confession in police speak.
It's a common phrase. You hear that a lot. If
Yeah.
I'd only made it back to Michigan.
If I only would have got away from it. Away with it.
Rich. The first car was found after a woman at an apartment complex in Bowling Green called police after she saw a man park a new Corvette with stickers on it at the complex and then walk away. 3 were found after a transporter driver was hired to pick up an older model Corvette to transport to Michigan. But when he arrived, he saw 3 brand new 2025 Corvettes and then told police the 2 men trying to move them were in a hurry. The driver said the deal was, quote, weird. Jeff, are you surprised that the old smash and grab is still a semi-viable heist tactic?
Oh, thank goodness it is, I guess.
Well, I mean, because they got away with it.
Well,
it's just that.
It's funny because when I first saw this headline, I'm like, all right, they caught him because of the GPS, that's in the vehicles. There's the VIN tracing technology. There's something here that because these are higher end vehicles and they would stand out, that's how they were able to recover them. Mm-hmm. Not because they parked them in very public places with all of the dealer decals on them.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we doing here, folks?
Yeah, some lady in a window is just like, well, that looks weird.
Yeah, why is there a $150,000 Corvette with all the stickers on it parked in the parking lot? This doesn't. Which one of these things is not like the other?
Yeah, and I get how they think, it's the crime of the century, right? No, man, we're not even gonna drive them to Michigan. We'll get them towed to Michigan, so it looks like they're just bringing them there, to be on the lot. I can see how maybe this was like the perfect plan, and it just went sideways on them.
Yeah, just not a lot of thought here. Again, Andy's going to talk about this, but when you're going to go after a high-end vehicle, you got to be a little bit sneakier if you're going to get away with it.
No, I mean, well, to Jeff's point, Andy, it was kind of odd that, they were able to just kind of drive these off of the lot by cutting a hole in the fence. And, that it wasn't really, it was, let's just say it was a high-profile item.
It's just you can't just leave. You can't steal something this not inconspicuous and then just leave it out, as we've alluded to already. Like, you have to have, if the heist was planned well as far as like cutting a hole in the fence, I guess, then the getaway was not. So
yeah. Just drive it, old school, or semi-old school, gone in 60 seconds. Drive it into a box truck.
Anything.
Yeah.
Almost
Conceal
anything.
it.
Really, they could have just kept going.
Yeah.
True. That would have been a better plan.
That's at least passable rather than just leaving them places. There was a weird amount of intrigue in this story for as kind of simple as it looked, from the guy who fled in a Jeep or something like that, to the paid big comments, to there was a charge of organized crime, links to organized crime. So there's probably more than just a smash and grab going on here, but and they would have gotten caught anyway because of the tow truck thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm just fascinated by this woman in this apartment complex. Like, first of all, what does this apartment complex look like? To the point where, someone sees a Corvette in it and is like, I better call the cops on this. Or am I just, because if I saw a car with dealer stickers on it, even a high-end car with dealer stickers on it, I'd be like, oh, they must be taking it somewhere. I wouldn't think to call the cops. But this woman was like, I'm calling the cops right now. So I was just curious about both of those circumstances leading to the initial police report here.
Well, and Jeff, was it surprising to you that, GM didn't even know they'd been stolen yet?
I guess I don't know the exact timeline here in terms of when they were contacted. It must have been like the next day.
Yeah.
So I could see potentially how there's a little bit of a lapse here, and the guy's like, wait a minute, They stole 8 high-end Corvettes.
Yeah, like
Those are missing. Yes.
I like how he checked the inventory and didn't just go walk around and find the big hole in the fence.
Yeah. Well, it was that was what stood out to me too. Is it's just like, what do you 8 are missing? Oh, well, yeah. Let's double check just to make sure. Just like, oh no, we got them. But that's I guess it's good to have discerning tow truck drivers out there, because I guess I never would have thought that they would be like, I'm not moving that. That's a hot item.
Well, and getting back to Andy's point, I got thinking about this a little bit. So according to the National Insurance Crime Bureau, they listed their top 5 most stolen vehicles. Do you guys want to guess at who's on the list here?
Well, I'm gonna say the Civic is the most stolen because there's just so many of them.
Is it still Hyundais and Kias because you can just apparently hotwire them?
Oh, okay.
Yes. The top 2, Hyundai Elantra, which my daughter actually drives, Hyundai Sonata, the Chevy Silverado 1500, the Honda Accord, and the Kia Optima. And so these are the top 5. But what's interesting is when you look at the number produced versus the number stolen, you can see why maybe it's easy for somebody to see an Elantra gone and maybe not, that doesn't really stick out too much because they made like 120,000 of them. And maybe a quarter of those is what was stolen.
Yeah.
There was a total of just over 40,000 Corvettes made. So when those get stolen, they do stand out a little bit more again.
So when GM says it is, quote, taking appropriate measures to address the thefts, you think they just like zip tied the fence shut? And they're like, that ought to do it.
Well, even if this wouldn't have happened, even these crazy circumstances with the very, attentive woman in the apartment complex or the transporter with morals here, like they would have had to strip out so much stuff to not be able to find these vehicles. Again, with all of the GPS, the mapping, and everything else, that's all the electronics that are part of what make these vehicles so expensive, would have been pretty easy to find at this point. Yeah. I just don't know how they thought they were getting away with this one.
What is an appropriate reward for the woman and the driver? I feel like they should each get their own Corvette.
That's a bit hefty.
If a finder's fee is 10%,
yeah,
maybe like 80% of a Corvette, get you a nice
deal.
Or Malibu or something. I don't know, which other GM car. I don't know.
Something that got lying around the lot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, our next most popular story this week: fuel savings of 7% after company literally reinvents the wheel. Fersa is a bearing company, and it says it has found a way to optimize the wheel. The Spanish company conducted a year-long trial of its new wheel hub designed to reduce friction and rolling resistance. The hub uses a combination of high load capacity, advanced materials, optimized lubrication, and, quote, microgeometric enhancements for optimized surface geometry. Fersa says testing proved the new design can reduce drivetrain friction by as much as half. They say these wheel hubs are generating 3% to 7% reductions in fuel consumption. It doesn't sound like much, but the average truck will save about $3,500 annually. Carlos Jenner is the corporate director of transport at CISA, a transport company and who participated in the trial that manages more than 3,000 trucks in a fleet. He said every percentage of fuel savings translates into tangible cost reductions at its scale of operations. This trial was conducted on different types of vehicles and many unique terrains, making it potentially applicable to many different applications. Andy, do you think that the Mesopotamians in 3500 BC ever imagined that we would still be tweaking their design 5,000 years later?
I do not. As a decidedly, you went all the way back to the invention of the wheel. I looked back a little bit at the invention of geometry because I feel like that is maybe a overlooked math discipline these days. And now, as a very non-math person, I kind of figured
that's David's wheelhouse.
I understand that.
Yeah,
we'll get there. I kind of figured that they ironed that little bit of the world out. Maybe Euclid, BC era. So it was nice to see. I would love to have somebody explain microgeometric enhancements in like a layman's way to me and still have it just go.
I think it just means it has a better surface finish. No,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's math.
Yeah,
There you go.
We trust David.
There you
with
go.
this, yes.
But I thought this was a very interesting story, and I'm sure there are any number of applications for this across any number of fields, but they focus on fuel savings here, which is obviously critical for trucking companies, but even for electric vehicles as we go down that road. If it's more efficient, it'll get better range. So it has a lot of potential for this technology. And I'm not to correct you on the air, but I'm wondering if this guy's name is Hiner. If it's Spanish.
Oh yeah, no, it was. I had it like all teed up and just kind of panicked.
Oh, well,
when I was looking at it again,
I mean,
I'm like, can I just call him Carlos?
Sure.
Yeah. No, want to get it right.
Yeah.
Pretty certain I didn't nail that.
I might just bail. I've bailed on names before and just been like the unofficial at this company. I've just bailed on that before. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, so I mean, a lot of people like to look at a story like this. They see 3 to 7% savings, and they're just like, "What is really the big deal?" But I mean, when you're talking about fleets of cars that have thousands of cars or trucks, I mean, that can be exponential savings and add up really quick. Like have a pretty quick ROI.
Oh, 100%. I actually went exactly where Andy went with this too. Not to Egyptian geometry and all of that, but in thinking about electric vehicles. Because we talk about fuel savings here, which is significant for a lot of fleets, but as we transition to the electrical side of things and we think about range, to be able to validate extended fuel range because there is less friction and there's less going on with the vehicle in terms of making it inefficient, that's huge.
Yeah.
And we talk about the things that lead to the thing. This is one of those. Now, we're just talking about automotive applications and wheel hubs. If these bearings can really have this type of impact in terms of improving performance, we use bearings in everything, man. I mean, there's a reason why we say it's all ball bearings because it kind of is.
Yeah.
And one of the comments on the site was, well, they wanted to see comparisons to some of the big name ball bearing producers out there, which is completely fair. But again, this was an isolated application. And if they can take these same approaches with all of the geometry and the surface finishing and everything else, and the lubrication approaches, yeah, this could have a huge impact in a lot of different industries and a lot of different things that we do on a day-to-day basis that we don't think a whole lot about. And all of those things are really less about, I think we have to stop thinking about fuel and just think about power savings or energy savings because that's really where this could transition to.
Well, in a step beyond that is also not just thinking of range and fuel savings, but also we always kind of directly correlate that to lightweighting. And whereas there are other design changes that you can make that could have a significant impact. It's just like, it's got to be lighter. It's like, well, not necessarily. So Fersa recently opened a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in China. I thought that was interesting. It's a new 30,000 square meter factory, a $40 million investment, and when operating at full capacity, it's going to double the company's production capacity in China. This operation has helped nurture partnerships with leading OEMs and Tier 1 suppliers in the region. This is just the latest expansion, kind of reinforcing the company's mission to optimize production capabilities while ensuring a more streamlined and sustainable supply chain. This company has been expanding kind of everywhere in key global markets. Now operates 6 manufacturing plants across Europe and Asia. It also does have a U.S. location in Northwood, Ohio, NKE Fersa. And that was the one thing that I just wanted to see because sometimes when I look at the companies that have these kind of like really cool advancements, I'm like, okay, but what's it going to take to bring it to the U.S. market? And they do have a footprint here. So it is very likely that, U.S. auto manufacturers could incorporate this design into future cars. I don't know.
Everywhere has trucks, but it feels like America particularly has trucks. So there's definitely a market for that here.
All right. Well, our next most popular story this week, Tesla Cybertrucks recalled after shedding pieces on the road. A defect in Tesla's Cybertrucks has forced the automaker to recall every truck it's ever sold, about 46,000 of them. Specifically, the contrail, the electrocoated stainless steel trim above the doors that runs from the base of the windshield to the back door, is falling off. According to the recall, the assembly is affixed to the vehicle with fasteners. The panel is delaminating at the adhesive joints, which is causing it to separate from the vehicle. According to Tesla, the rail is held on by a structural adhesive that is susceptible to environmental embrittlement. Tesla plans to reinforce the part with a different structural adhesive. The company is also going to weld a stud to the panel that will be attached to the vehicle's structure with a nut. Tesla says only 1% of the vehicles have the problem, and that it didn't find out about the problem until January 2025 during a routine review of field repairs. However, owners have been posting about the problem on social media for months, and more than 150 owners have filed warranty claims. Some Tesla enthusiasts say that the trim might not be the only components secured with these problematic adhesives. Other parts, including the truck's quarter panels, could also be vulnerable to embrittlement failures. Andy, this one can't be fixed with an over-the-air update. Do you believe that Tesla didn't catch this one until January 2025, even though the customers have been, posting about it on social media for months? I mean, I think of all the car companies that might have a social media imprint, or like people just kind of watching it. Maybe it's Tesla.
Yeah, I don't know. Whether someone is actively trolling Reddit or whatever, looking for, screw ups on Tesla vehicles at Tesla. Maybe somebody should, but it wouldn't shock me if they. I think the more likely scenario is that, recalls are expensive, and if it's just like this anecdotal thing that they can just repair and not have to worry about, then they may not take that step until they actually have to worry about it, which they determined whatever later on. But I tried to do some cursory research on, what a record might be for model year or 2 model years for recalls. This is the 8th of this car, and I don't know what the record is. I couldn't find it, but it can't be much higher than that, right? It's been out since the beginning of last year.
Yeah, and it's already had 8 recalls.
8 recalls. This is the 8th, and it's just it seems like the least of this company's problems too. That the most noteworthy vehicle that it's churning out now has all these problems, and that's like the least of its problems because. Yeah. Like if it were me, and it's not, but if it were me and I was running a car company and basically actively alienating a huge chunk of my customer base, I'd at least want the cars to work without having high profile problems. So I don't know. It's just a mess.
Well, it is a mess. And I do think that maybe that was part of it. Just okay, it's 1%. So it's, a handful of cars. And really, I don't think, it can just be structurally flawed. But I think the biggest problem is that, if these do start flying off, it's a huge metal part.
It looks like they cheaped out, basically.
Yeah, it's, Jeff, I feel like this kind of thing happens a lot in automotive where you specify an adhesive, you think it's going to work in all conditions. All of a sudden you get it in the cold and it just doesn't work. And then you realize, we only have one other fastener holding it on. That's a problem. But, I don't know. I feel like they maybe could have seen this and maybe fixed it a little bit more quietly rather than waiting for it to kind of blow up with a bunch of people getting on their phones and recording this giant metal flap flying off their Cybertruck.
Yeah, whenever we have these recall stories as it relates to a Tesla, I try to compartmentalize it because you just get drawn into a different scope of perspective because it's Elon Musk and it's Tesla and it's all the hype and everything that he's done to sort of assert himself as not just the face of just this company, but of this technology.
Yeah.
And that's not really fair. I think to really properly assess this, you need to look at it from an automotive perspective. Now, it's scary because like Andy alluded to, this is the 8th recall. And while the model year goes back to November of 2023, really these vehicles have only been on the road for about a year. Mm-hmm. Okay, so to go through 8 recalls in that amount of time should lead to a little bit more R&D. It was reassuring to see that they recalled every single one of them. Yeah. It was a very good move in that respect. It was also good to see them being a little more transparent about what was wrong and what they may have done incorrectly and what they're going to do to fix it. That's what you see a lot of other automotive manufacturers do in these types of situations. So I do feel like they're learning a little bit there. Mm-hmm. Got to remember, this is a young company. Regardless of what you think about the Cybertruck, this was a flaw. They're fixing it. They're learning from it. They're moving forward. So in that respect, you have to say, okay, this is a maturing company that's going through some growing pains and appreciate it from that. Mm-hmm. However, there's also this other part where when you want to be the rock star of the industry, you are held to a higher standard. Mm-hmm. And there is a different level of scrutiny and notoriety that you're going to have with all of this. And if you're going to embrace the positives of that, you need to also embrace these dynamics. And I don't think they're doing that very well at all because their approach is, hey, it's not that many. It's not that big a deal. We got it covered. Okay, let it be. So I was curious just how big this piece is and what this means, okay?
It's like the size of this table.
Well, what was really interesting is I found a post on the Cybertruckowners.club.com. So this was it's basically their board where they're going back and forth. And this one guy posted, and this is in February of this year. He said he wanted to scale the metal portion. So he said it's 5 pounds. These are his words. This is from the guy who posts under the name of Venus Fly. He said, so imagine a 9-foot long, 2-inch wide, 1/16 inch thick piece of stainless steel in the shape of a boomerang liberating at 70 miles per hour on the interstate. This could have decapitated a motorcyclist behind me or could have gone through someone's windshield. Someone was lucky tonight, including myself, because he felt it fly off of his truck and he put his hand up. He's like, yeah, it's definitely gone. The rest of his post details exactly where he was, what he was going through, what he saw when it came off. So this was, a month and a half before the recall took place. And what he said there is, that puts it in perspective. That should have had Tesla, just that post alone, should have had Tesla responding much sooner, much more strongly, and doing things to reassure people. They feel like because they are who they are, they'll fix it and it's fine. Just let it be. And that's not enough anymore. If they want to grow and mature as a vehicle company, they need to address these things more strongly. They need to come out with a stronger statement and maybe reassure the customer in a stronger way than what they have been, especially when you look at all the problems that they're having that Andy was talking about. You look at some of the recent releases from BYD and how well they're doing. We know Tesla's sales are down. This is not a time to sort of rest on your hubris. This is a time to be more proactive and reassure the customer that you're still with them.
Well, and it's, what did we say, 46,000 vehicles, right? But you have this base of owners that is such strong defenders of Tesla, regardless of anything that happens. So take care of them. Make it seem like you want to do right by them, not just I'm still surprised with how many people are like, wasn't that big of a piece? I thought the whole roof fell off. And you're just like, well, would you have been upset then? Or were you like,
Read that guy's post.
Yeah.
5 pounds.
Yeah.
70 miles an hour.
Oh, I know, but
he puts it in great perspective.
I know that he puts it in great perspective, but then when you tell the people that no matter what will jump on the grenade for Tesla, they're just like, come on.
Well, it's hard to sort of put everybody under the same roof here, but if you go through this message board, it was really interesting because you had people basically saying, okay, could it have been this? Not overly defending, not being you're overreacting or anything like that, just saying, could it have been this? Could have been that? And the response back and forth is, no, this is a design flaw.
Yeah.
This is something that needs to be fixed. And then they vent some of their frustrations because it's like 2 to 3 months before they can actually get in and get the vehicle serviced so they don't have to worry about this 5-pound piece of metal flying off their roof and potentially not hurting them, but somebody behind them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and just talking about how, let's just say the temperature has changed regarding Tesla. I was looking into the market for used Teslas and used Cybertrucks. So according to cars.com, searches for used Teslas decreased 16% just over the last month. And this is when non-Tesla EVs interest has increased about 30% just over the past year. So interest in EVs up, interest in used Teslas down. The other one, used Tesla prices are falling at more than double the rate of the average used car price, and Cybertruck's resale value is now 58% less than its original price. And I can't imagine, Andy, that this is going to help things.
No, but I think those are factors beyond just this piece on the Cybertruck. I think there's, as I tried to delicately address, it's a matter of alienating a huge section of what should be your customer base as BYD and all these other companies are making better and better and better EVs. You're like, they're not the only game in town anymore. And they're also, by they, I mean Elon Musk, is also making high-profile, controversial decisions elsewhere. So it's just really not doesn't seem like a great time. I don't think any time's a great time to do that, but especially now is not a great time to be doing that.
No, agreed. All right, our most popular story this week. A new EV company trolls Elon Musk with ultralight Roadster. EV maker Longbow is taking 2 sleek new models to market. The UK startup is supported by a strong pedigree with ex-employees from EV leaders like BYD, Tesla, and Lucid Motors. Longbow hopes to leverage this talent in order to, quote, capture driving enjoyment with two new, exciting electric sports cars, the Speedster and the Roadster. Longbow calls them FEVs. The F stands for featherweight, and instead of your typically overweight electric, the automaker is breaking the mold with a Speedster that weighs less than 2,000 pounds and a Roadster that comes in around 2,200 pounds. Tesla's Roadster is about 500 pounds heavier. Car and Driver says the Longbow uses an aluminum chassis and composite panels to cut weight. The cars are still powerful, capable of going from 0 to 62 in just 3.5 seconds. According to a recent feature from Top Gear, many of the components, like the batteries, motors, and brakes, will be sourced from other companies, possibly the nearby high-performance component suppliers that service areas or service Formula One and Formula E teams. The Roadster is also getting a lot of attention as a not-so-subtle jab at Tesla. Top Gear says it was, quote, deliberately named to annoy Elon Musk. Tesla has yet to release its own Roadster model, which has been in the works for some 8 years now. For Longbow, it took two years, but it will still cost $84,000. The Speedster is going to run about $110,000. Jeff, this story was popular because of the company's pedigree and design, right? Like nothing else, right?
Oh, I don't know. There may be a polarizing name or two in that headline.
Yeah.
That got people's attention, certainly. Great marketing by this company, by Longbow, in terms of getting a little bit more attention to what has become a very crowded marketplace. Mm-hmm. And really kind of a tough one to break into when you look at a six-figure EV, even $80,000, $85,000 for an EV right now, especially a two-seater. Yeah, that's some rare air. So pretty bold to just want to enter into that category. I think what really caught my attention is when we start talking about lightweight electric vehicles. That becomes a whole nother realm of safety concerns for me, because we already have a lot of heat coming off those batteries. We've talked about that. We've talked about some of the different wear and tear that can just have on the vehicle mechanically. But now we're putting a lot of power, very quick, a lot of speed into a lighter weight vehicle, like half the weight of what these EVs typically are. Or even when you look at like which model it is, I can't remember. One of them has like a 320 horsepower engine in the back.
Yeah.
Man, cars with that much power weigh twice as much for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
There's a safety element there. It actually keeps them physically grounded to the road. Mm-hmm. It makes sure that when you light them up, you don't go flying. The tail end doesn't go flying off in the wrong direction. It makes it easier to control. And if something bad does happen, you've got a little bit more weight to take care of you and protect you.
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the day, if you drive foolishly in a fast car, bad things are going to happen, and there's not much you can do about that. But I do think some of this lightweight design brings up a lot more safety concerns. Mm-hmm. Granted, you're spending this much money on a car, a two-seater. This is what you want it to do.
Yeah.
I would just think twice about getting into a vehicle with that much power that is this light.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we recently covered another expensive, exotic, hand-built electric vehicle with that RBW coming to Virginia. I mean, I feel like the reason this is a story at all is because they're like, you know what? What if we call it a Roadster? And, maybe we get it to market sooner. I think it's just really smart. It's really smart marketing.
100% agree. It's been longer than 8 years, hasn't it? Since he came out with the prototype? Yeah, I thought it was.
Well, I think I could be wrong, but I felt like that's when he said the first one was going to be on the market, so 2017.
Because they were using the Lotus, right? The British vehicles, like sort of the prototype, and I thought they had that out like almost 15 years ago. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems longer than 8.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Andy, so according to Car and Driver says, quote, certain elements such as lights and mirrors will be parts bin pieces to keep costs down. Now, do you think that it's necessary to keep costs down for a six-figure EV?
I wouldn't have thought so, but I guess every little bit helps in this market. If you're going for, a car like this, a Roadster like this, maybe that's maybe that tips the scales over an electric Porsche or whatever you might else be looking at. I
Look
don't know.
at this beautiful design. Where'd you get the mirror from?
I read this and I thought, like, before I got into the meat of the article, I thought, wow, I wonder what range this gets. Because that's kind of the equation with electric vehicles is the batteries are crazy heavy. So, you can only have so much of a battery or battery packs or whatever in the car, so it can only go so far. And people have range anxiety, and that's kind of the push and pull of this whole industry. And this one, I went into it thinking, if it weighs a quarter of what other EVs weigh, maybe it could get more range out of it. Instead, where are my notes here? The Speedster has a 275-mile charge, which is about standard, but that's the lower production run vehicle. And the Roadster goes just 170, a little under 175 miles.
Yeah.
So, if you want to, and there might be other equations beyond that as far as, as you alluded to, having this much power, whatever. But it's just, in addition to the seating and the price tag, it makes me wonder about the feasibility of this car. And maybe that's not what they're going for. They're going for this niche market of people who might want an electric Roadster and trying to, target that audience specifically rather than the people who want 500 miles of range that you might be able to get by cutting weight elsewhere.
Sub 200. That really stands out nowadays, though. I mean, that's interesting.
Well, even around 200, but I wonder what like the average range is for somebody with like basically a high-end EV like this. Like, I don't think this is someone that's going on a long trip, right?
No, you're not taking this on a road trip.
Yeah,
no.
You're like pulling this out of the garage to bring to the steakhouse, on a nice night because there's no top. So I think I wonder what that like average commute is. Just being when I was down in Florida this weekend, it was like there are so many nice old restored cars, and people brought them out because it was Friday night and everyone was going out to eat, and I was just like, he must not have brought that far, or just because so I wonder if it's you don't need that much mileage here.
I mean, fair. I think if you've got something with that much power, you want to open it up. So you're going to want to go, but you're right. You could go 60 miles, 120 miles round, 120 miles round trip. That's a pretty good cruise, and you're fine.
Yeah.
So the Speedster, they're only going to make 150 of them, hand assembled. Do you think they sell 150?
Yeah.
Yeah. Roadster won't have limited production, so I really think that there could be a market there. Because the Roadster's the more expensive, or the Roadster's the 84. I know that was getting mixed. Speedster's the 110, and the Roadster's the 84,000. And I don't know. There might be a real market there. I know that it's not me.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see what Longbow does. Hopefully they're able to overcome. I mean, the one thing that we didn't talk about that we do with a lot of EV startups is just the many barriers to success that they will have to overcome to be a true success story. All right. Well, before we jump into, in case you missed it, we have another word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by ShopView, a CAI solution. The manufacturing execution system, MES, that you choose massively impacts what your operations will look like for years to come. Doing your due diligence and cautiously weighing your options is critical in selecting the right system for your business. The Manufacturing Execution System Buyer's Guide offers important considerations when selecting MES software, mapping out the steps that lead you to the MES that checks all your boxes. There is a link to download this buyer's guide in the body copy description below, also in the live chat. In case you missed it, stories not as popular on our website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
So I picked an article, and I was actually kind of surprised. I thought this one might get on the podcast. I thought this might be one of the stories we were discussing. But I picked the one talking about Cleveland Cliffs laying off hundreds amid what they describe as a weak auto market. Now, basically, the article goes through, talks about Cleveland Cliffs, which is the fourth largest supplier of steel in the U.S., basically shutting down a number of facilities. According to a company's company's going to remain active, but the Dearborn pickling and galvanizing line that employs 550 workers, according to the company, it's going to shut that one down. It's also got another 630 workers at a mines in Minnesota that is shutting down. And basically, Cleveland-Cliffs is blaming all of this on a weak automotive market. They said the market has been flooded with steel. There's soft demand and oversupply, which is why they're hoping that these are just temporary shutdowns. They feel, and if you listen to the president of Cleveland-Cliffs, he is definitely on board with President Trump and all the tariffs and everything else that's going to be done to correct this issue. Because one of the things that they closed out in the statement, it was basically, we believe that once President Trump's policies take full effect and automotive production is reshored, we should be able to resume steel production at the Dearborn Works facility in Michigan. I thought this was interesting for a couple reasons. The first reason that this jumped out at me is Cleveland-Cliffs was one of those that was supposed to be a potential solution for the whole U.S. Steel, Nippon Steel merger that's still been going on. Now, we won't know how that's all going to play out until July, I believe it is, June or July, when the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. comes back with their ruling. Basically, they've put it off another 6 months from January to figure out what they want to do here. Well, I think Cleveland-Cliffs is out of the running, okay?
Yeah.
If they're laying off 1,100 people, their profits are down, their stock price is down, even though they still talk very optimistically about being able to be part of this U.S. Steel solution, kind of doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting in the fact that you've got a company that is facing a lot of problems right now, potentially from these tariffs, because they should be in a good place to capitalize on these 25% steel tariffs that are coming from Canada and every place else, even higher with stuff coming from China, and they're waiting on production to pick up in the U.S. to solve their problem. That doesn't sound right to me. I think we're missing something here, and I think there's bigger issues here. One of them is probably a lack of diversification on Cleveland-Cliffs' part, which again goes back to the fact that they might not be the best solution for U.S. Steel. I think this is going to be an interesting one to watch in terms of what happens with this company, because if we do, down the road, if we get there to a point where these tariffs kick in and it does exactly what the president wants and we have all this reshoring come back, is that actually going to have an impact on a company like Cleveland-Cliffs?
Yeah.
Will this actually, all the domestic production, really show that these tariffs worked? So there is a potential case study situation there. I'm not optimistic of that, but I could be wrong. Right? And I think it's worth watching there. It's also worth watching just because we are talking about the fourth largest steel producer in the U.S. having some serious issues right now because they're so focused on the automotive market, didn't diversify. They didn't learn the lessons that a lot of people in metalworking did during the late 2000s, and what that's going to mean for them long term, and what it's going to mean for steel production long term here in the U.S.
No, that was, and we've covered this story. We covered the story a few months ago. Where my first takeaway when I saw this was like, oh, okay. When the new person has entered the chat in the Nippon Steel deal, I was just like, oh, okay. So that was all bluster. There was no real chance that was going to happen. Did you have a chance to check out this story, Andy? What'd you think?
When he talks about full effect, I assume he's talking about automakers completely overhauling their supply chains for domestic sourcing.
Well, essentially, yeah, what he's saying is they're going to bring all this production back to the U.S. and they're going to need.
And maybe, but that's years from now. I mean,
optimistically.
Years. Right.
Yeah, optimistically.
So,
yeah.
I mean, if the auto market is slowing down now, I mean, maybe down the horizon if you want to be optimistic, but that doesn't look great for the interim, those years.
No, this president for Cleveland-Cliffs, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his last name, Conglavis, he's drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
He is 100% on board with what President Trump has said he's going to do, what he's doing, all of the things. And that's a lot of jobs at risk to really kind of say this is the course that we're going to follow, if indeed that is the case. And it was something as unproven as that, to put that much at stake is interesting, and we'll see how it plays out.
Well, do you think that's part of the issue, is that people think reshoring happens overnight?
You think so,
Oh,
Andy?
I'm sorry,
I
I
mean,
nodded vigorously. Yes, I think people have very little grasp of how global the supply chain is for pretty much everything, let alone automotive.
Yeah.
It's not something you just
like
flip a switch.
25% tariffs today, more cars in America tomorrow, right?
Right.
Well, the part of that equation, and we've talked about this, so I apologize if I'm being repetitious, but the part that is still not given any transparency about is, okay, let's say that works. We still have like 500,000 manufacturing jobs we can't fill here. What is that part that is going to make people flock to these open positions to help pick up the pace and restore these production levels that these companies are still going to need now that they're making it all here in the U.S. And how is that going to offset the higher costs of things and all of that? There's still a missing piece there that we haven't seen enough information on, in my opinion, to get this far, behind it.
Florida's working on it. You know what their answer is? Child labor. They're looking at rewriting the laws of child labor in terms of, I think they want you can be 14 years old and work an overnight shift on a school night. That's what a new law proposes. So,
I mean, I understand how ridiculous that sounds in theory, but growing up, I'm sure we all had friends growing up here in Wisconsin that they were on the tractor till midnight.
Yeah.
When it came to harvesting or planting or whatever. So I understand how ridiculous that can sound in some applications, but in others, we've seen it. I mean,
yeah. We'll see if anything comes from it, but I agree. But it's also, we've all worked farm jobs, and I've had to work, during harvest time, I've had to work some late nights, but that was also a handful of days.
Fair.
It wasn't,
it's not a shift.
Yeah. It's not just no, that's what I do every week, Wednesday through Friday.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I should disclose I've never worked a farm job.
Oh, well, we'll get you out
Very
there.
soft.
Well, for anybody listening,
Very soft childhood.
Andy is looking to get out and pick some rocks this spring.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Hey,
If they still do that.
Oh, yeah. No, that's, hey, I mean, next time I'll take you out to my dad's place.
Yeah.
And we'll just be like, okay, there's one rock. No,
Get some fresh air.
get that one up. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You need to hydrate. That was my last mistake when we were taking trees down.
Yep.
I didn't know that body parts froze. All right. In case you missed it this week, and I kind of talked about it. I touched on it a little bit on last week's episode, but I wanted to draw a little bit more attention to General Motors and NVIDIA collaborating on AI for next generation vehicle experience and manufacturing. So at NVIDIA's GTC conference that was held in San Jose earlier this month, General Motors and NVIDIA announced a collaboration on next-gen vehicles, factories, and robots using AI, simulation, and accelerated computing. The companies are going to work together to build custom AI systems using NVIDIA accelerated compute platforms to train AI manufacturing models for optimizing GM's factory planning and robotics. GM's also going to use NVIDIA Drive AGX for in-vehicle hardware for future advanced driver assistance systems and in-cabin enhanced safety driving experiences. GM has been investing in NVIDIA GPU platforms for training AI models across various areas, including simulation and validation. GM is now going to use the NVIDIA Omniverse platform to create digital twins of assembly lines, allowing for virtual testing and production simulations that are going to reduce downtime, potentially. The effort will include training robotics platforms already in use for operations such as material handling and transport, along with precision welding to increase manufacturing safety and efficiency. So I just wanted to draw a bit more of a spotlight on what the partnership between GM and NVIDIA was going to look like, and just show how, sometimes we talk about this AI might be a little bit more of a lip service, and also how it kind of already existed, like digital twins, stuff like that. But how a real player like GM is working very closely with NVIDIA to just drive efficiency, make things a little bit safer. And I don't know, I think it's really exciting. I hope everything works according to plan. And but I do like the idea of having this digital model of your entire factory where you can keep tweaking a couple of things and it lets you know whether or not it's going to work. So I don't know. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to check out this story, but a lot of things came out from that global conference in San Jose, but how automakers are turning to AI, and other digital tools. It's an example that I think other manufacturers could learn from.
100%. That was the point that I was going to make. That was the first thing that stood out here, was somebody like GM essentially endorsing all of the work that NVIDIA is doing here with AI. That does lend to a lot of credence and credibility, and really gets other smaller manufacturers thinking about how can they make this work for me.
Yeah.
Whether they're a supplier, whether they kind of run in unison or alongside somebody like a GM. Yeah, I think this, and all the things that they're talking about here too, I think are really important, because when you talk about simulation, when you talk about even material handling, you're not talking about eliminating human beings from the workforce or from the plant floor. You're looking at ways to make their jobs easier and more productive and more efficient and safer as well. When you look at transport of products, look, we've heard some horror stories in terms of appendages and conveyor belts and other bad things going on. So if we can use these digital twins or use AI to not only assist with those procedures, but then develop these digital twins to eliminate those types of situations from even potentially creeping up or different bottlenecks. This is very exciting, especially when you look at NVIDIA's a chip maker.
Yeah.
They're not producing huge pieces of equipment. It's a chip.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Well, and Andy, one of the things with this story it made me think of was how, we always talk about expansions on these manufacturing campuses, and I just feel like one piece of every major manufacturing campus, or let's say industrial center or industrial complex, is going to be like a data center.
Yeah.
Just like, okay, so where are we going to put the giant underground, super cool data center?
Depending on how big your facility is and how much automation is in it, definitely. I mean, you'd have to, I cover the distributions sector mostly, and that's when people talk about that, they're concerned about that, like how, what kind of technology do I need to run AI? And there's, third-party software companies that do that. But for these big projects like this, that's their tech infrastructure is something they're going to have to consider. We just talked about kind of the missing piece between, adding manufacturing domestically and the persistent labor problems, and really, this is not going to be the answer for everywhere or even broadly, but the answer is getting more efficient, basically. So that's probably what we're talking about, is the AI and other advanced technologies helping the companies that can afford to do so and are prescient enough to do so get ahead.
Well, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just saying, in the next part of that too, is you mentioned where we're going to put all these data centers, where are we going to get the power supply? That's the next thing. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of these chip makers working with energy companies to figure out viable solutions there. We've already seen Microsoft and Amazon basically opening up their own nuclear plants. If that's the next step or whatever the case may be, I think that's the next spot you're going to see NVIDIA and some of these other chip makers focusing on.
Like not just a microgrid, but like a micro nuclear grid.
Well, I mean, we've talked about a lot of different stuff. Hydrogen, hydrogen is becoming more popular as a potential sort of campus-like fuel source or energy source. So whatever the solution is, whatever NVIDIA and some of these other high-tech companies come out with, that does set the pace and sort of give us a benchmark or something to shoot for.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Like, if that came out with negative connotation, I didn't. I was just like, no, that's like,
no,
they're really,
yeah,
they're going to have to do that. Andy, what's your in case you missed it this week?
I picked a story we ran about factory-built homes, basically. So the AP profiled a few different efforts across the country to build modular homes amid the well-publicized shortage of affordable housing in, it feels like, most metro areas of this country. And they basically did three different sections. One focused on hempcrete, which is a mixture of hemp material from that plant and mostly lime, I guess. And it's a more efficient way to build wall material. It serves as both structural and insulation, and it's fireproof and some other noteworthy characteristics in that. And the other two sections focused on two companies. One, which was building with 3D printing, and the other, which is called Fading West in Colorado. They're basically making houses on an assembly line. So this Fading West company, the line can build a house in 5 to 7 days, I think, and once it's shipped to where it's going to be placed, it's move-in ready in 6 weeks. And these are not, you picture factory housing and you picture, brutalist or dystopian, projects basically, but these are standalone homes that wouldn't look out of place in any, compact, entry-level home type neighborhood. I would certainly live in one if I was looking for a starter home. And the story also includes an example of kind of why it's important is they're working with local governments to build housing basically for teachers and school district workers who would otherwise be priced out of these, luxury ski communities basically in Colorado. And they'd have to drive from God knows where to their jobs. And that's another cost that's added on to their, they didn't take these jobs to get rich. They want to help kids and serve their communities and that sort of thing. So that's kind of gets at the crux of why the housing shortage is such a problem, and also, create some jobs too.
Yeah, tiny home communities for teachers.
They're not tiny homes. They're
I know. But man,
they're smaller homes. I'll give you that. They are smaller, but they're they're perfectly. They have balconies and porches and stuff. They look nice.
Yeah, a great village to raise your kid in. Just like who
yeah.
lives here? They're all teachers.
Yeah.
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right.
Perfect.
No, I think it's kind of I don't want to say sleeping giant because I feel like it's out there quite a bit, but the technology that is going into the construction business right now is truly revolutionary. And while I do feel like there's always been a next best thing whenever we've been looking at construction, I really feel like something's got to give now, given the housing crisis, the cost of everything, the labor crisis. It really is at a breaking point in terms of they need a solution, like a tech-based solution. And I think one of these has to be it.
Yeah.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on some of these new technologies, and potential viability? Yeah,
I think it's important to keep pushing. Of these three, I like the 3D printing. We've seen that technology sort of used in construction, and for me, it's just a more, like, visually, I get it.
Yeah.
I can see it coming together. It seems to make a lot more sense in terms of using additive. I've seen the arm going back and forth, basically, with the forms and everything else. That makes sense to me. First impressions when I think about hempcrete is that going to last?
It will.
So
hempcrete is actually, it is one of the things that people in the hemp industry have been betting on forever, and it just isn't getting appropriate buy-in, but it is a viable building material.
So this is not like the equivalent of a sod house or something. I mean, that's because that's the image that it's a branding problem.
That is a part of the big branding problem, is that you see hempcrete and you're just like, you think that the guy that's installing it is, smoking a J and just like, man, your house is going to be.
This stuff is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem with it, and because a lot of people that support the hemp industry, they don't talk about it in terms of its medicinal benefits. They talk about it as an actual, building material. And yes, I think that
because if we can come up with a solution that is not so toxic as concrete production. I mean, it's environmentally speaking, it's rough.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. The viability of the material itself is fantastic, so it's tough to beat that way. But we need to produce it in a more palatable way.
Well,
there's no way around that.
I mean, and Andy, that palatable way is hempcrete, right? Ideally,
they are certainly touting its attributes in this story. There's no company behind that. I think they just talked to a researcher at Penn State University who's kind of working on that project a little bit. I'm sure there are companies out there, but that was the crux of this article here.
It's just they got to call it new concrete.
Yeah, honestly, I think they have a branding problem more than anything else there.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, let's do our final thoughts. Andy, what's your final thought this week?
It's opening day of baseball season, but most importantly, it's almost outdoor biking season. So for 5.5 months or whatever, I've been biking in place on a little rack in my basement and hating every second. So now I almost get to enjoy the lovely pedestrian and bike paths in our little suburb that we both of us call home. So I'm excited for that. I'm not excited to mow the lawn, but it's kind of I'll take that trade, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So
no, it's a bike ride through a conservancy. Okay.
Yeah. So if my otherwise stellar mood at all times is even better, that's why.
Do you have a screen that makes it look like you're going on the?
It's a little thing, and I put my normal bike on there, and it's just miserable. It really is.
Well, I will say that in terms of getting outside, I basically spent the last 6 days outside in Florida all day. And while, I was occasionally crippled by the sun, it was just like, that's right. This is nice.
Yeah.
Being outside is nice. And other than like how the salt just gets into everything and the tap water tastes terrible, other than that, everything's fantastic.
Yeah.
I was just like, you never want to be in a place where you have to Google, can I drink the tap water? Like on day 3, I was just like, are we going to die? Like, what's a safe level of chlorine to ingest on a daily basis? Because we drink a lot of water.
Gallons.
Yeah.
Gallons.
But no, it was a good reminder of how you do need to take time for yourself and your family and just completely unplug for any number of days, be it a long weekend. That's what Anna's doing now. And just how it has, really positive impact on your family and your own, sanity, just like to get away for a second. And just every once in a while, the phone pops up and you're like, is that a now problem or is that a later problem? that's a later problem. And then it pops again and you're like, nope, it's a now problem. But it's still good to unplug for a bit. It's highly recommended. Get out, especially this summer. And I cannot we loved the area in Cape Coral, but it was one place in particular called Jungle Doria. You got to go. You got to ride on the super buggy that was made by, quote, a bunch of hillbillies drinking a bunch of beer. But, man, I felt safe, and it was fantastic. And highly recommend it. We loved it. Airboat tour, alligators, everything. You know, I've got all my fingers, and, I mean, it didn't come close often. Yeah, Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
So I'm looking forward to this weekend. Probably the biggest dork reason why, but I'm reorganizing my garage. So it's going through all the stuff and putting it in better places. So for like the last 3 weeks, I've been trying to like figure out what I'm going to do and try to get more stuff off the wall and like in actually cabinets. I bought some new storage stuff. So I'm actually super geeked up about this weekend, just hanging out in my garage by myself. Which is, so if anybody's got some tips on, garage upkeep strategies or whatever, let me know. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. So
no,
weird.
that's, I mean, everyone's me time is different, Jeff.
Yeah.
Like, but I mean,
I do drink about 7 beers when I'm doing it. So that is that.
I was going to say, like, there's,
However you got to get it done.
Yeah. But I mean, okay, so one thing I was always curious about is like you see the garage where people like tape the outline of the tool as to where it goes. Because doesn't that impede the ability to then reorganize? Like you got to take all the tape down.
Yeah, I'm not going that far. That's like, when I was in the military, you went into the garage, the maintenance shops and stuff. That's how they had it, so you could keep track of everything. I don't want to go that far.
Yeah.
Although it would definitely deter my wife from grabbing my tools because sometimes that does really frustrate me.
Yeah. Just
like well, that's the, I don't know, obsessive compulsive or, being very anal about that stuff and wanting it in the right spot so I know exactly where to go for it and not have to look for it.
Yeah, just like, hey, see the tape measures missing.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's why for me, because like I always know that the tape measure is on the top of my box. And like when I go for it and it's not there and I'm just like, it's literally in the easiest spot to put back. Right on top. But I'm sure it's in a better spot. Makes more sense.
Oh, no, you gotta let her know your boundaries there. You gotta, come on. You can't mess with your toolbox.
Right.
Today
Bigger fish to fry.
Pick your battles.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, Andy, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first and subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine so you can join us every Thursday when we go live. For Jeff Ranke, Anna Wells, and Andy Zoll, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.